Good morning and welcome to Haventree Parent Podcast, where we get a chance to talk about something that's important to us and to you before the kids wake up.
Today, we are going to talk about the social impacts of childhood cancer on a family.
All right, so like you said, today we're going to talk about the social impact on our family or families with kids with cancer. And this is probably another one of the Josh subjects because this is where, I don't know, probably I got hit the most as far as like being social and going out and doing things with other people and getting to do all those experiences of life. And since we were on a new course for Kenzie's cancer treatments, it was sort of, we had to pull back from that. And there's definitely, I don't know, some lack of just the whole social aspect has been hard to deal with for the last few years. There's stuff, and we'll get into this, just been times where, you know, I've tried to push for just doing simple events, even if, you know, Kenzie can't be involved, but trying to make sure that she doesn't feel like she's not included with that. But just sort of like find reasons to go do something social or have a social event that, you know, gives us some sense of normal relations with people outside of just our family. And that's been hard in this course of 2 years worth of treatments, plus, you know, flu season and now COVID and all this other things, that just, you know, keep bringing us back to staying home. So we've definitely had plenty of time to learn all of the routines that we need to have for doing nothing right now. But it's been not an easy process to just cut out your social life. We've gotten to that point where we've been able to manage it, but it was definitely, I don't know, hard to get to this level of doing nothing basically except for trying to just have fun with your family. So,
well, and I think, you know, we struggle with it for a couple of different reasons. You know, on one hand, you are very much the extrovert and I'm very much the introvert in our family. And so you struggled a lot with not being able to do stuff. And then I think too, we have always been very family oriented in the way that we do. You know, we do lots of activities as a family. That's just, you know, part of being a family, I guess, or our culture of family. And so, you know, there have been times where it's like, well, you know, Josh and the kids can do something and I can stay home with Kenzie, you know, and that is not how we wanted to do family events.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even doing anything like that, I think it took a year to get to that point where it was like, okay, well, I'm going to take the bigger kids and go do something.
Yeah. Because there's always the fear of bringing home, you know, germs back to Kenzie. You know, and then trying to balance that with never wanting the kids to blame Kenzie for not being able to do fun stuff, you know, or whatever. So there are a lot of things that we've had to figure out how to juggle related to that. Certainly the conversation is timely now, as everyone is experiencing some amount of social isolation. And, you know, quite frankly, we've been dealing with it a lot longer than most of the world has. And it's not something that we would wish on anybody.
Right. No, I had friends that asked at the beginning of this year when everything started getting shut down, like how we had managed with things over the last 2 years of just like cutting back on social aspects. And in a weird way, I told them like, seeing that everything was getting locked down, wasn't encouraging by any means, but it was, it put everybody on a playing field where we were all the same. So it wasn't like I felt like I was missing out and seeing people go do things and events that I could no longer do because now everybody couldn't do them. And so
that sounds really unkind and selfish.
I know it does. And that's what I'm saying. Like for 2 years, I felt like I was
missing out while everybody else got to do stuff. Yeah.
And so seeing that everybody was now closed off from them, it was a totally different mind shift for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying like
I'm glad that everybody else
to be closed for 2 years. I'm just saying like for 2 years I'd been stuck in that process of like everybody else can do these things, but we can't right now.
So you do bring up an interesting point, and I kind of mentioned it, I think, just like a week ago, maybe.
It's because they asked the question, and that was just, I don't know, my response.
You know, it is something that like there is as parents kind of this difficult social dynamic where you don't, or at least I avoided parents of kids with cancer for a long time because I had a hard time handling my own emotions. And so hearing anything negative from other parents was really difficult and overwhelming for me. And so that was, sort of the way that I protected my own, mental well-being, emotional well-being, whatever. And even now, like when I see or hear people talking about like relapses and things like that, or, like I came across something the other day that was like any missed dose of chemo makes a kid 4 times more likely to experience a relapse, or some random, and immediately like my thought was like, oh my gosh, have we ever missed a chemo dose? And it just is like this instinctive like anxiety arises of like something bad, something terrible could be right around the corner. And so for me, mostly avoiding or not having real in-depth conversations with other cancer parents was something that I needed to do for my own, whereas you kind of sought out like groups and things like that for,
Right, yeah,
for
that's what I was gonna say.
shared experiences and stuff.
Yeah,
For me,
I was more digging into those things.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, who do I need to talk to? Where's the source of information?
I really stayed away from that.
Right. And I wanted to learn about it as much as I could. I wanted to know. I was like, maybe I'm going to go back to school and become a leukemia doctor. I don't know, because I'm going to dig into this and just, cure cancer right now because I got to save my kid. So,
but then on the flip side, it was also very difficult to interact with some of our friends, or even just do normal things, like I remember a couple months after Kenzie was diagnosed, I went with a friend to Applebee's. And it was just, like we were going to go to Applebee's, just have dinner, catch up on life. And Applebee's was doing like an Alex lemonade stand, program, like deal where like, do you want to donate $5 with your bill to Alex's lemonade stand and we'll put a, lemon with your name on the wall. And I like burst into tears, and it was just like, Alex's lemonade stand had contacted us, about like the stuff that they do for families of kids with cancer. And like, so even social events that like just seemed very benign and not threatening or not a big deal became situations that were sometimes difficult or were unexpectedly like emotional. And it did make me, not want to go into the world and potentially face that sometimes, because I never knew like when something like that would be there, like a simple trip to Applebee's was not so simple, or, when friends would talk about, the birthday parties and you guys are all invited and like, well, have fun, and like, it is such a lose-lose kind of thing, right? Because like, I would have felt badly had we started to be excluded from those things, right? So I'm thankful that our friends still invited us, even though they knew we couldn't come. But then it also felt really crappy to have to continue to say like, I'm sorry that we're going to miss it, have fun, we'll send a gift, whatever, and so, if you happen to be one of our friends who's watching this, like, thank you for continuing to include us. That was the right choice, right? But it still hurt, it still stung to have to like continue to turn those things down and think like eventually someday we'll be able to do that again, but it's not going to be anytime soon.
Right. And even our current home, like we bought to like sort of have social events here, and,
right.
Bonfires and people over to swim or, see
we have
some
a pool
animals
to be able to share with other people. We
Yeah.
had homeschool groups and church people come to see our animals. Like that was,
we wanted this
to
place
share
we wanted
with
this
others.
place, yeah, to have fun with people. So,
and we haven't been able to do that, we haven't been able to go to church. Thankfully, our church has always had services online since Kenzie's been diagnosed. But the kids weren't able to go to children's church, and we struggled with that. And the fact that we had always been a family that was, the 3 times a week-ers, and suddenly we were, 0 in 2 years,
Right. Well, there was at least 2 months, I think, last year.
There's been a couple of times, yes, that we've been able to.
Last summer, I finally broke out and was like, okay, look, she's out. She's coming down off of her high-dose chemo.
Where things were okay
OB's
for a
old enough
while.
that we can do some stuff. And so I think we made it to like maybe 3 or 4 different social activities that were amazing.
Right.
And
then we had to lock things back
And
out
then once
again.
fall season was coming again, like we were like, okay, let's stop going out to all these places and try to, minimize exposure to germs and just life.
Yeah. So, I mean, not only has there been that literal isolation from people, but I think more difficult has been sort of that the isolation of not being able to be genuine or understood. And I think that's, for me at least, where it's been really difficult. Because it's like, I don't know, it's hard to express what you're going through sometimes and not feel guilty or mean or selfish or dramatic. Or, like there's so many worries about relapse, and like I feel like sometimes when I've said stuff like that to friends, it sort of is like, well, Kenzie's done so well, and we're just going to keep praying that relapse doesn't happen, right? And it's like, those are the right words to say. I don't know any better words to say, right? If the roles were reversed, I would have nothing better than that to say, but it also doesn't really make me want to say it or share it again, and so it's very like isolating in how open you want to be sometimes with people, just because it just feels awkward and uncomfortable, or like there have been people that had no idea. Like I remember when we were looking at moving our care from one children's to a different one, I reached out to a previous coworker and dear friend who I knew had worked at the hospital we were planning to go to, and just kind of asked, I was like, hey, you had worked on the oncology floor prior to, what we do now. And she was like, yeah, why? And I, just texted back, because we are thinking about moving our daughter's care down there instead. And so then she calls me and she was like, I had no idea that Kenzie had cancer. And she's just somebody that hadn't been on Facebook a whole lot. Obviously, I hadn't been working there anymore because of Kenzie's diagnosis, so she just hadn't heard. And I felt really bad. I'm sorry that I, told you this flippantly in a text, and so it was a very awkward sort of encounter. And so there are times that and I'm sure that you've had that experience at work too, where, somebody will say oh, how's it going? And, you say yeah, things are going fine. My daughter's in the hospital right now for chemo. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, I think I did that once. And then I think the next weekend, his wife made a blanket and we got it for Kenzie.
Oh, yeah. And we love it. It's
she
so
loves that blanket.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, but it was definitely a random work conversation. And it was well,
right.
He's like, I told my wife and she went to make this nothing for your daughter. So
which is so sweet.
She made this amazing blanket for you. And it was pink and green and yellow and it was beautiful. So.
Beautiful. We got so many compliments at the hospital, but, but so there's kind of this weird dynamic sometimes too of it becomes just second nature, or you do things just because you're thinking about how you're going to juggle. Now I have had 2 pregnancies while Kenzie's going through treatment, which is, I don't recommend that you ever be pregnant if you have to have to go through this. It is very overwhelming.
Or in the middle of a pandemic or whatever.
Yeah, none of it. Anyway, so, I would try to schedule several of my OB appointments in advance so that I could work around chemo and different things like that. And there have been a couple of times where I've gotten like pushback from the front desk workers, like, well, we don't typically schedule more than 2 out, or like different things like that. And, and I would just say, like, I understand that. I had talked with the doctor. She said it was fine because my daughter's going through treatment for leukemia. And, so I need to be able to plan around that. And they would just like have this like deer in the headlights look of like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it was like, I wasn't trying to make you feel bad or like get special accommodations. I just really need to schedule a few appointments so that I can schedule my daughter's chemo, and so like it kind of became sometimes this awkward thing of like, I would almost hesitate to say that or like be cautious about what I said sometimes, because even though it's just a part of life for us right now, I would make other people uncomfortable, and so trying to balance that sometimes was a very weird dynamic. And again, like a way that it just became kind of uncomfortable, or something that we tried not to talk about because we were not wanting other people to be uncomfortable, and then I think then the challenge became like other people didn't want to ask because they thought we didn't want to talk about it, and so on both ends, it kind of became this awkward topic sometimes. And so, again, we think it's important to talk about it so that others that may have a friend or somebody that's going through something similar, kind of have an insider's perspective a little bit.
Well, and that's, I mean, again, like I said, it's Awareness Month, and that's why we want to talk about these things, is because it provides awareness for, the next family or whoever else you might know that could be facing this, and just gives you, like you said, the insider information on what they're going through and just the levels of intensity that there is, or needs or gaps in the day or whatever. I mean, it's not everybody's going to do exactly as we've done.
No, certainly not.
And there's going to be a lot more, your miles will vary type of thing. But yeah, no. And like you said too, when having Obi, I mean, he's been only around family or the 17 nurses that we've seen at the hospital or, the doctor's teams. And that's pretty much, he knows us.
He's
and
not ever,
those people. So
we were talking right before we started, like he's been to church twice maybe
to get dedicated
in his life,
and then maybe 3 other days,
so whereas like our other kids always were like excited to go to the nursery staff, like, yay, this is what we do all the time, like
like I think has different ideas, but
and I think like someday when Obi's like almost 3, we'll finally be able to go back to church, and it's going to be something he's never done or remembered, and like how strange that will be for him. Or like,
I'm sure he'll love it, but
well, he probably will because it's Obi, but or like when we went to the hospital for him to get stitches, like I thought it was so funny to watch the way that he interacted with the nurses, because he hasn't really had the opportunity to do that for his entire life. And, to see how confident was he with strangers? Did he get upset when they got close to him? Like different things like that, because he hasn't had the opportunity for any of his life that he can recall to interact with strangers, Or I remember the first time things were going well, and Kenzie's counts looked really good, and so we like went to the grocery store, and she just like looked around everything with like this wide-eyed wonder. But like the last time she had been at a store, she'd been 2, and so there was this aspect of like her not even really remembering going to the grocery store, which is something that we take for granted and is a chore,
right? And that's again, this, like I said, this probably ties in emotion on some emotional level for myself, because of wanting to do these social things and knowing that that's been a case where she's gone to the store once and been awed by it, and knowing that there's so many more cool, better things out there that I would love to be able to go do and show her or all the kids that haven't been able to take those opportunities. And it on some weird level, like it pains me in the back of my mind to know that they're missing out on those opportunities as we go through these treatments and this pandemic, and wanting to go and show them all these cool places that are out there for them to go experience, Kings Island or whatever, the next closest thing, and just go do stuff that is fun for them to learn and just see the world. Which it might be on fire right now, but in their minds it won't be. So yeah, I hate that they were missing out on those experiences at this
And
point.
especially Ken's
But
with
we'll get
her,
there. We'll get there.
yeah, with her personality, like she lives for adventure, she lives for, her adrenaline junkie self, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, and so the fact that like we talk about like when your cancer is gone and your button is out, her port, we're gonna, do these adventures and we're gonna, do this and that. And
yeah, it's probably part of the hope that we have is just like being able to get out and go.
And I think that is important, to talk about, we are going to do this. We are, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? And I think it's important to talk openly with, those siblings as well. It has been, I think there have been phases where it's difficult for some of the kids, or where there's some frustration about not being able to do something. And I think it's important to let your kids, to talk with them honestly about that and say like, I know that it stinks that we can't go to Kings Island right now, but we will do it. But right now it's important that we keep Kenzie healthy and we keep us healthy, and there are fun things we can do at home. And then sticking to that, whether that's like we're all going to have a camp out in the living room and eat popcorn and junk all night and watch 3 movies before you all pass out. That's not the same as going to Kings Island or doing the super fun things. But it is still fun, it is still a way to make memories, even though we're stuck at home. One year we had Halloween and we had them trick or treat around our house, and I was upstairs in one room and Josh was in the basement somewhere, and they would like come and knock on the door our bedroom door and say trick or treat. And I would answer the door in a silly voice. And then they would go and run down to Josh, get a piece of candy. And then they would come back up and I would answer in a new weird voice, or put a scarf on my head, or like just do different silly things, so that it was silly and fun.
Yeah, it was nice because we made sure we didn't get any of those orange and blue, whatever those Tootsie Roll things are, because those are nasty. So we knew the candy they were getting was the candy we wanted.
It was good candy that I could steal. No, and so it was like, was that, I don't know, like, was that the best Halloween ever? I don't know, but they enjoyed it. Like, they still remember that Halloween and talk about it, right?
Yeah, they still dressed up and got candy,
and we were silly, and they painted pumpkins, and remember when you put on that one scarf and you talked like a pirate, and or like, so they remember and value, and take the emotions that you give them, so if what you're saying to them is like, well, we can't do Halloween this year because of Kenzie's cancer. Sorry guys, I know that it stinks, but maybe next year. Like, or if you say like, hey, we can't do this, but we're going to do something else instead, and just make it fun and silly. Like that's what they're going to take from that when they're still little. Once you have teenagers, that might be different. But
then last year we actually tried to do Halloween, and it was ice,
freezing,
freezing rain, and it was awful. So,
but the same is true of like birthdays. Yes, it stinks when we can't. Kenzie's never had a birthday party, and we love to have a couple birthday parties for kids each year, and we take turns. Kenzie's never had a birthday party, and we plan to like have a big one when we're finally able to. Probably number 6, but
not in January.
It's not going to be this year, I don't think. Probably when she's 6, but. Like we can still make it fun. We can still do silly things. We can, rent a blow up house and put it up in our basement and just, go crazy or whatever. There are still ways to make events and memories, even when you're stuck at home, even when you're, protecting your loved ones. And that's true. Obviously for us, having a kid with cancer that's still in treatment, but it's also true, if you're dealing with the social isolation stuff of just the pandemic and the craziness. I've had some dear friends, complain about like not being able to do X, Y, or Z because of the pandemic. And it has, you know, kind of created some weird emotions for me. You know, on the one hand, I don't want anybody to have to deal with the isolation that we have. You know, it's horrible and it's not fun, and it's emotional and stressful and overwhelming, and, you know, it's just not fun.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was trying to say at the beginning. I know I said it weirdly, but
it's okay.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's a little hard for me to hear because, you know, like there's a part that thinks like, you've heard and watched. Sounds like there's a dog itching right above us. You've heard and watched us go through this for 2 years. Like, what do you want me to say? You know, and it just is like, it is a little bit strange sometimes. And so I think, you know, if you happen to be somebody that's, you know, a parent of a kid with cancer yourself, I think, you know, my statement to you would be, it's okay to feel that way sometimes. You know, I think it's important to accept that and move on and not dwell on that, because I think when you dwell on those things, then you could become a really mean-spirited person. But it is okay, and it is normal to have those frustrations or those thoughts sometimes. And talk to somebody that you're close to and you trust about it, and then just move on, you know, and understand that everybody has kind of their own things and their own lives and their own things that they don't talk about either, that they may be going through. And so that's okay, you know. But there's also nothing weird or horrible about you, you know, kind of like what you were saying too about like, in some ways, like everybody else is experiencing what I have been. So I don't, for once, feel like I'm missing out a whole lot, you know, and
Right.
like that can sound really mean. And I know it's not meant to be, but like it is also normal to kind of feel some of those things. So you shouldn't necessarily feel guilty about that, but you should also just probably be thoughtful and conscientious about how much of your mental space that's consuming, you know, and that's not growing into something ugly and unkind or hateful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, you know, what beautiful way to end on that. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I hope this has been encouraging to you, or has given you a glimpse into 2 years of social isolation instead of 8 months or whatever it's been for most of the world. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. 2 years ago was the first time we heard the phrasing of being new normal. And I think what we
I know.
finally learned what that meant and
Yeah.
made it work for us.
Yeah, I know. I see lots of those like, we don't like new normal. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm telling you what, neither do I, but I've been doing it for a long time. I
Yeah.
feel ya.
Yeah.
So,
and,
yeah.
And parents with kids with cancer long ago from before us. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
make sure you like, subscribe, share this with whoever you think would be interested in it. And we will see you on the next adventure. Bye.